Hi everyone, how are you? Welcome to my monthly episode of Real PR with Fiona Scott. Absolutely brilliant to be here. It's the first month of summer. It's mid-June. How do we get midway 2024 so quickly? Time really does fly. I've got a great guest today. She's a really good friend of mine and a client, and I'm a client of hers too. So we're just going to get right into it. She's going to introduce herself. Please welcome the lovely, the gorgeous, the wonderful Taz Thornton.
Hello, how you doing?
Hi Taz. Thanks so much for joining us today. So I know who you are. Let's assume nobody else does. So introduce yourself.
Oh my goodness, how could nobody know who I am? Pink Powerhouse, Super Soul Coach. I work with individuals and organisations on everything from confidence building through to smashing that glass ceiling, boosting their sales, boosting their efforts, boosting that fire in their belly. And for individuals, I work with them on personal brand. If they're a business owner, again, confidence, their message, their story, getting their packages right. And I do a fair bit of spiritual empowerment work as well. Sometimes I'm taking people walking over fire or glass, breaking arrows with their throat. And when I'm not doing that, I'm speaking on stages, teaching other people to speak on stages, or writing the occasional book. How's that?
Oh yeah, and tell us, when do you sleep then, Taz?
Sleep? What is this sleep of which you speak? I sleep. I need a good sleep. I need a good 8 hours, or I am good for nothing. So yeah, sleep is important.
Right, I'm going to pick up on the most obvious thing for people who haven't met you. Tell us about why pink hair.
It's a really boring story, Fee. Honestly, everyone thinks it's got so much to do with the brand, but it's coincidental. So I was sitting in my hairdresser's chair one day and I said, "Oh, I'm bored. And she said, "I fancy doing it baby pink all over." And I went, "Go on then." And that's it. That is the story behind the pink hair. I could make something up, but that's as exciting as it gets.
But I remember, I'm going to talk about your pink hair because I actually knew of you for ages before we even spoke, and was a little bit in awe, a little bit scared, a little bit, oh, what will Taz think of me? So I'd be interested to know, what's your first memory of me then, Taz?
I'd heard other people talking about your PR. I knew you used to be a journalist. And given that Asha, my wife, and I used to run our own PR agency, and like you, we're both former journalists, when it got to the point where I had too many plates spinning, and I knew I needed somebody else to start looking after the media side of my brand a bit more. I need a journalist. I need somebody I can trust. And you were the obvious choice. So my first thoughts of you were really just somebody who knows what she's doing and is a safe pair of hands when it comes to handling a brand.
And it was really scary for me though to start doing PR or media outreach with someone who's also got a journalist background. That's quite a scary thing.
Yeah. What made it so scary for you though, Fee?
It might be the pink hair.
It's pink. Could you get a softer colour than pink?
But actually, once we got into the meat of it, it's absolutely fine. We're just two journalists who know what stories are. The one thing I never had to have a conversation with you about, Taz, and it's something we all have to deal with in business, is that you never had stupid expectations of PR. So tell me and tell the people who are watching or listening, when you want to have PR in your business or for your brand, what should people's expectations be?
Well, that's multi-pronged, really, isn't it? I mean, the first thing is they need to make sure that they're handling as much of their own brand as they can. So a lot of people poo-poo social media and want to immediately leapfrog everything and end up in Forbes straight away. And unless you're going to pay a lot of money, it's not going to happen. But the thing to remember is that a lot of journalists, for your credibility, are going to want to see your backstory. They're going to want to see that you have a following. They're going to want to see that you know your shit. So you've got to handle your own social and online followings as well and make sure you're building a brand there. Also, don't think you're going to go straight to the glossies, because again, a lot of the nationals and the magazines will want to see that you have a solid track record in local and regional PR first. That's their safety net, if you like. And also, just because you think something is exciting, it probably isn't. And that's where it can divide again, isn't it? Because there's newsjacking, where something that you have going on that's current, you can leapfrog on the back of an existing story that's out there, or a special day or an anniversary or something like that. But there's also the feature-based PR, which is where you can then look more at your backstory, your credibility, things that you've done, your experience that brings you up to who you are today. But you're not likely to be able to tap into those pieces until you've built your brand to such a point that you become a person of interest rather than just a person who wants to be interesting.
Okay, so let's talk about. No, that's excellent. I mean, yeah, I might as well not be here and just let you. but I just want to talk to you. I often get people say to me, "It's not about me; it's about the business." And I know you know what I say to that, but if you're running a business and the business has its own logo and it sells its stuff, whatever its stuff is, why do you need personal brand?
Look, it's simple. If you want to learn from somebody in business, do you want to sit down with Richard Branson or Virgin? Do you want to sit down with Oprah Winfrey or Harpo? You know, you are the person behind the brand. Your business is 9 times out of 10. You try and send something just across saying, this is what we do. This is how our products and services are better than anybody else's. Then that press release is going to just get passed straight to the sales team. What they're interested in is your experience, your knowledge, your opinion. And that's something else people try to shy away from, isn't it? Oh, no, I don't want to have an opinion. I might rock the boat. But let me tell you this. Beige might not offend anybody, but it's nobody's favourite colour either, is it? So you have to be brave enough, if you want to get some decent coverage, to put your head above the parapet and to talk about what drives you, what makes you tick. But it has to be relevant to whichever journalist might be writing about you. And that's what we neglect. And from my time in PR, that was the thing. Well, look, I've done all of this. I should be in the media. Well, yeah, to be fair, you probably should. But that's going to take a fair bit of legwork and it's not going to happen overnight. And you got to push a bit too. It's much easier if you've got a bit of effort from both sides.
Well, just before I came on with you, something amazing happened, and I thought I would just share it with you because I think it shows what experience does. I have a friend who worked in a local weekly newspaper for many years, doing bread and butter stories for very local clients. So not in Lincolnshire, but in Wiltshire, where I live. Uh-huh. She's now a journalist for PA, literally started 2 weeks ago. Yeah. So I said to her, I've got a load of experts, including Taz, who'd be really good for you. When you need an expert, let me know. Yeah. She started a week ago and she's emailed me saying, give me a roster of all your experts because I'm desperately in need of experts. Bish, bash, bosh.
Perfect.
It's people. It's people.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's all about people.
Nothing annoys me more is when you hear businesses referring to the local media as just the local rag. No, please don't do that. It's insulting. They are salt of the earth people, and they are the people. They're the backbone of your PR, really.
And also, people forget that most journalists in the national and international press started in a local newspaper somewhere, and they will default back to the area that they started when they're looking for experts.
And that most of the nationals will have people getting all the local and regionals and flicking through them every day, looking for national leads from local stories. So it really can be the foothold.
Really true of news agencies as well.
Yeah.
They will look for local stories that they can pick up and run with and sell it into multiple titles, which is, why us having you and I and all the other clients having a direct line into someone at PA is absolutely fantastic. But if she hadn't worked on a local paper, we wouldn't have that.
And of course, the other thing that a lot of lay people, for want of a better term, don't realise is that a lot of the national freelancers will make the effort to go and meet the local journalists and essentially tip them finder's fees. So it's not just about them waiting for you to appear in print. It's about the local journalists tipping off the national journalists. That happened when I was in local journalism. In fact, that was where I ended up with my first foray into national journalism, was working with the national journalist who'd come to our newspaper office and took us all out for a pint. It happens a lot more than we think.
Yeah, it's a relatively tight-knit community, how the media works in the UK, isn't it?
It is.
And tap into, and that's why I personally believe the best PR people have a journalistic background, who have spent significant period of time actually working in the media. And I don't mean 5 minutes or 6 months or on an internship or a work experience placement. I mean actually doing the day-to-day grind.
Yeah.
Right, Taz, I'm going to put you on the spot with newsjacking then. Right, okay. June is Pride.
It is.
Come on, share some of your Pride stuff with me.
Oh, June is Pride. One of the things that I'm really getting a bee in my bonnet about at the moment is trans rights. And every time I've been approached by a politician or a party, I've gone back to ask what their stance on trans rights is and what they are doing to protect trans people. I think there's an awful lot of smoke and mirrors and absolute rubbish being peddled out there today, not least run by one of our formerly favourite children's authors. I think it's absolutely appalling. There's all of this stuff going on about changing the Equality Act to make sure that people can only access same-sex spaces for the gender they were assigned at birth, or more to the point, the sex they were assigned at birth. And the trouble is, most people think of trans women when they think about trans people. I guarantee all of us will have walked past trans guys in the street, and trans women, but more probably trans guys, and not had a clue. So for all of those who are complaining, how are you going to feel when essentially, to all intents and purposes, a hairy ass bloke comes into the ladies' bathroom? Because that's what you're legislating for. So I've got a bee in my bonnet about that. I've got a bee in my bonnet about the slippery slope. They're starting with trans, but where is this going to finish? And all the stuff about suppressing hormonal treatment for kids. One of the biggest, most common reasons that people pick on trans women is because they say they look like a bloke in a dress. Hideous, awful thing to say. But for those who do have more of a masculine physical appearance, how might their life be different now if they had been allowed to have puberty blockers when they were young enough, before they started to develop masculine features? So you are creating a problem. You are just creating emotional health, physical health, mental health. You have blood on your hands if you're behind those ridiculous moves. There's no evidence. And as for trying to force new restaurants to have single sex rather than mixed toilets, I don't know about you, Fee, but most of the modern restaurants I've been into where there are, genderless loos, they're all separate cubicles. So why does it matter?
I find the whole loo argument ludicrous, because I travel a lot. We have a caravan. I travel a lot overseas, and campsites in France or in Germany, it's all individual. In France, all the loos are the loos for everybody. Now, you might have a male and a female door, but if you walk through the door, you're both looking at each other in the same space. It's just not this.
It's absolutely feeling. Bonkers.
And how do you feel, Taz? I know that this is something you feel strongly about it. I feel strongly about it too. We have friends who are trans, both male and
clients as well.
Yeah.
And non-binary and gender fluid. There's, also.
There's a whole range of different ways of being, ways of being attracted to people, ways of living. When you express a view like that, you do risk, don't you, particularly with this, for all the reasons you've expressed, you risk negative comment and being the butt of something negatively. How do you
it's polarizing.
handle that? Yeah, how do you handle that?
Well, 9 times out of 10, I find it's to do with education. So, of course, everything the trans community are going through now, not counting the rubbish from government, but in terms of public opinion, it's the same kind of stuff that gay and lesbian people were facing X amount of decades ago. This seems to, it's a similar line that follows through as far as I can see. You know, I can't speak for everyone just because I happen to be a gay woman, obviously. But a few years back, one of the TED Talks I was asked to give was about equality and homophobic abuse and homophobic bullying. And honestly, I very nearly turned that TED Talk down. It was the third TED Talk I'd been invited to present, and I very nearly didn't do it because I was worried about all the backlash. And in the end, I recognised that if I was being asked to do this, then there was a reason for that, and I should take that opportunity. You know, it doesn't mean I have to do everything, but by the same token, if not me, then who? And if not now, then when? And the actual talk was really well received. And it was only after it went live on YouTube that I started to get the really right-wing, US-styley, Westboro Baptist Church styley abuse on my social channels. And everybody I spoke to told me to just block and delete, block and delete, block and delete. But I took a different stance there. Apart from the ones that were just so base, there was never going to be an argument there, that were just trolling for the sake of it. I would open a discussion with everyone. I would say, can you tell me more about that? Can you help me to understand where that view is coming from? And for those who did open up, we had some really good discussions, to the point where a couple of them actually changed their opinion. And honestly, I was not going into that space to change opinions. I was going in that space to try and find the common ground. Because until we get to that point where we can find the common ground and understand one another and maybe learn from the differences, we will not be able to move forward. In the same way that I've sat opposite someone who's pro fox hunting and we've just listened to one another's opinions to try and understand and see people as human beings rather than just a thing with an opinion. One of them actually said, are you going to be doing another one of these talks? Because I'd love to be able to learn more. Quite a few of them thanked me for being willing to enter a dialogue with them. And I think that's what this is about. And, you know, not too long ago, in fact, just before Christmas, I think, we met up with one of our friends who is, let's say she's a massive Harry Potter fan, who perhaps doesn't read into things much, takes things at face value, particularly if her heroine is spouting about them, and was talking about, do you remember the furore over the people who have periods? You know, there was all of that going on. And when I sat down and explained to her why it was people, she honestly sat there saying, I didn't understand that. So you mean people who are that? And it was just like somebody had taken a sheet from in front of her eyes. And I think that's the problem. People listen to those they look up to without actually scratching the surface and without looking at the facts. And with the trans debate and, you know, people being able to pose as a woman and go into a women's changing rooms, for instance, let's face it, if there was anyone who was so much of a sexual predator, they would just go in. And it wouldn't matter whether they were male or female, what it said on their birth certificate, whether they had nobody is going to go through the trouble of properly going through gender reassignment to be able to go into a women's changing room. Because once they start to go through gender reassignment, the medication they're on stops anything below the waist working anyway. So the sexual urge isn't going to be there. So all of this is an absolute nonsense. There are always going to be sexual predators. There have always been sexual predators. And those who are driven enough don't need anything in the Equality Act to make them think again. They're just going to go for it. It's a nonsense. And are you going to polarize? Yeah.
It just reminds me of the whole AIDS thing. And I just feel that if we don't stand up for the people we know, and we'll all know somebody, if we don't stand up for those people, we'll be on the wrong side of history. Because I think just knowing you and Asha, you've been together 25 years.
26.
Is it 26 this year?
26 from April, yeah.
I was just thinking of what it was like when you two got together 26 years ago compared to what it's like now. And we've had coverage on that, Taz, haven't we? We've had coverage on your journey. I mean, give us a sense of when you first met, you know, how did you behave as a same-sex couple in public when you first met?
Well, in some ways, we behave in the same way today, Fee, but we would have to be very, very careful about how we were behaving in public. We'd think about if we were walking through a town centre, for instance, are we standing too close to one another? You know, we weren't going to hold hands or have any. I'm not big on PDA anyway, on public displays of affection, but we'd really have to think about that. Things like if we're going on holiday, is it safe to go there? If we're going to go there, do we need to book a twin room or 2 separate rooms? Is it safe to book a double room? All of these things. You know, we've worked in offices together where we've been in the closet at the same time for good reason. It's a different world. Remember that when we were first together, things like Section 28 was still law. And, you know, we were both journalists. I still remember being a journalist and covering a story of a couple who had bombs through the letterbox and dog muck through the letterbox. And I remember doing the fire calls and speaking to the fire department about the firebomb they'd had. And the response was simply, well, you do know they brought it on themselves. You do know it's a couple of women shacked up together. And, you know, I think because of my background as a journalist, I'd seen and reported on some of the worst elements of homophobia. So then being together with a woman, because we were both journalists, we were both hyper aware. But even in recent years, that's still the same. You know, we live not too far from Peterborough. So right, Middle England, or Middle Earth, as I like to refer to it. And some of the worst elements of abuse and have been just in the middle of Peterborough. I remember a few years back, we were walking along and I just literally walked out, reached down and squeezed a hand for a second. We laughed about something and it was just literally a quick hand squeeze. And we were then followed around the town centre for goodness knows how long by 2 women quoting scripture. You know, I had to duck into a shop to get away from them. And there was another time where I was in Peterborough on a free hugs event, nothing to do with LGBTQIA, B and Q, KFC, however many letters we want to put after it now. But somebody had obviously clocked that I was gay because I have short hair, so I must be. But I also wear makeup. That's confusing. Well, you know my take on that, Fee, you know.
Yes.
For goodness sake, woman, just come out. This guy.
I think my husband will have a shock.
Oh, your husband's a lesbian, we know. You know. Somehow this big muscly guy had clocked it and managed to sidle me away from the group and back me up against a brick wall and started lecturing me on morality. So that's recent times. You know, I've had blokes grab me and stick their tongues down their throat because obviously I just need a good man.
Yeah.
It happens.
There's a good man behind us. Totally.
Hello, good man behind you. He is.
Is in our background.
He is.
I'll tell him off later. Yeah.
Oh, just give him a big snog from me. So
yeah, I can't. Well, that really scare him.
It will. We all think that it's done and dusted and nobody struggles anymore, but it's not. And I think that's one of the problems. It's the thing I call the liberal blind spot, because those of us who think live and let live, and so long as we're all consenting and we're not hurting anybody else, so what? We assume, because of the way social media and algorithms work and the human algorithm works, we assume everybody has the same opinion, and that those who have a more extreme view are in the minority. But of course, those with the extreme views also believe they're in a majority, and we are the loony left and in the minority. So it hasn't gone away. It's just that the way online algorithms and the human algorithm works, we don't see it. We see our own beliefs.
We do. And I think that's amplified. Social media amplifies that in a way that didn't exist, say, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So you can be lulled into a false sense that everybody believes the same things as you, whatever your beliefs are.
Yeah.
But you are doing something. You did last year and you're doing it this year. You're doing something during Pride Month. So just Tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, on a whim, really, a group of some of my clients and friends who are all on that LGBTQIA plus spectrum somewhere, said, you know what if during Pride Month we just get together and do a weekly live video chat show, kind of loose women, but for the rainbow crowd, and for any allies who want to come and learn, or people who aren't yet allies and want to come and learn. And it went down really, really well. And this year we're doing it again. We're doing it through June and July this time. We're spreading it across 2 months just because our diaries are so bonkers. So there's me, there's Katie Neves, who's a wonderful trans activist. You may well have heard of her. She's got quite a big name around these parts. There's Katie Allen, who works an awful lot on equality and identifies as ace. And there's Katie Brown, who is a mixed race lesbian. And we're all just there and just chatting. We don't have any fixed agenda. We're all talking about elements that we'd like to bring up. Obviously, the trans debate is big at the moment, particularly with the elections coming up. We're talking about intersectionality a lot as well. And we're just going to shoot the breeze. And a bit like this, people can come and drop comments or ask questions live as well. And it's a good way to show that we're actually human. We don't have 3 heads. We don't like to hang around changing rooms trying to prey on people, because who does that?
And also last year, it's for me, because I like to be educated and to learn, especially when I work with people like you. I need to have an understanding. I remember once trying to book a hotel room for you in Usher, and the fact I had to go through like 20 questions just to book you a double room, I just didn't get it. Yeah. Because Steve and I've been with Steve nearly 30 years. It's something that just isn't in our experience. It just isn't. So you'd never think about it. But also, it was a safe space to ask questions. I sometimes struggle with what all the different names mean. What does it mean if you're this? Because it used to be just you were lesbian or gay. That related to male and female. And now we're a range of different things, which is good, I think.
Yeah.
But we still need to ask questions. It's okay to ask questions.
Yeah, and absolutely. All the labels, they sometimes confuse some of us. You know, I sometimes find myself asking other people in my community, just explain to me. Katie Allen is a great one. Just explain to me what that means. And then within that bracket, what's the spectrum and what's what? And sometimes I sit there thinking, do we really need all these labels? Do we really need this one and this one and this one? And you know, a lot of people get confused about bi, because we think bi and immediately think things like biplane too, so it means two. And bisexual doesn't actually mean that you necessarily just prefer 2 different sexes or 2 different genders. It can be a multitude. And what? Well, why do you need that and pan then? Well, that's slightly different because. And hey, ask questions. Find a safe space and ask the questions. God knows I still need to ask the questions. I don't understand all of it. And, you know, in my ideal world, none of us would need labels and we wouldn't assume. But I don't think we're there yet. I think if we got rid of labels now, there's still too much of a right-wing edge out there that could potentially drive us all underground and make it worse. So I long for a day when we don't need the labels, but I don't think we're there yet. I think they're still quite important for now.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, okay, so you're going to be talking about this during this time, and you mentioned handily the general election. The general election in terms of PR is a newsjacking opportunity.
Yeah.
But there are various, I guess, issues that you might. So is there anything else that you think is really important for you that you would be willing to comment on in the media in these next few weeks in the run up to the general election?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, small business owners, we need to make sure that small business owners are looked after, and there are no gaps. I know during all the COVID times, you really looked out there, and there was a chunk of people who were missing, weren't there? Who were sole traders and VAT registered. We need to make sure that small business owners, solopreneurs, are looked after properly, and also. We need to look at the threshold numbers in terms of how much people are taxed as well. Because when we look at those numbers, sometimes I look at them and think, hold on, that benchmark really isn't high enough or isn't low enough. I think sometimes the people who are coming up with these numbers seem so out of touch with what is a lot, what is not a lot, what's achievable, what isn't achievable, and also if somebody manages to just get to that level, what impact is it going to have on a sole trader if they suddenly hit a higher tax bracket or start being expected to pay into this, that, and the other? So there are so many, and I don't have time to go into all the nuances here, but we need to look at that. Another thing we need to look at is what's going to happen with the funding going towards to support neurodiverse people, because I know there's lots and lots of talk at the moment about ADHD and why is everybody suddenly being diagnosed with ADHD? And it's not that there are suddenly more, it's that there's now more awareness. So I can speak about this because I am literally part way through a diagnosis for ADHD right now. I've got a call that should be the diagnostic call with my specialist next week. So it may well be that the times in my life where I've been being diagnosed with depression and or anxiety, maybe it wasn't that at all. So many of the struggles that I've experienced through my life could now be, as I sit and think about it, due to undiagnosed ADHD. So that's something else that I want to be looking at, because I know so many people at the moment have been just railroading towards access to work funding. And I know that questions are starting to be asked. And I know now it can be a bit of a lottery according to which assessor you get in terms of how much of that funding opens up. I want to look at what the government's going to be doing there. And I want to look at how that is being worked out with businesses as well. Because, of course, if somebody is self-employed, then the funding will come straight direct from government. But if somebody is employed and gets some kind of access to work allowance, very often the bill for all the extra equipment or whatever the support they need is being given to the business owner, and they suddenly have to find this money and then claim it back. And I know there are ways around that, but that's another thing. How is that going to be impacted with whoever is coming in? Are they going to look at that fairly, or are they going to kowtow to all the people saying that everybody's suddenly got ADHD? No, they don't.
You and I know, Taz, that working with small business owners a lot, as we both do, that there's a high level of things like ADHD, and also dyslexia, because often people that don't perceive the world normally, whatever the hell that means, they are great fixers and problem solvers, which makes them great entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. I bet if you look at the majority of well-known entrepreneurs, I bet a big chunk of them have ADHD.
Yeah.
Mel Robbins is ADHD. Simon Sinek is ADHD. There are lots of other people I suspect are probably ADHD, and it's that hyper focus and the ability to problem solve very, very quickly, and that deep level of intuition that it brings that allows them to do that. That's why you have so many in the entrepreneurial space.
And I just wonder, in the fullness of time, when ADHD is better understood, what that sort of nurture versus, will your early childhood experiences have led you down that path? Or did you always have it and experiences make it come out? I don't know. I just think that we've only scratched the surface of this.
Yeah, and I think it's a bit of a snowball effect as well, because, of course, we had a similar outcry about all these people suddenly wanting help after Davina's menopause documentary came out. And then suddenly all these women who hadn't understood or hadn't known what help they could access started to ask for help. And that's not the fault of the documentary. It's that the health service has not been equipped for it before now. And of course, when it comes to women, there are so many women who are misdiagnosed because it doesn't display in the same way usually in women. And of course, what happens there, lots of women are being diagnosed with things like ADHD later in life because perimenopause brings those symptoms right up to the fore where you can't ignore them anymore. Certainly that's happened for me. Yeah, Natasha, and creativity. Certainly that's what happened for me. I hadn't even been aware of it. But once my hormones started popping all over the place, I had other people contacting me. Some guy contacted me on LinkedIn that I wasn't even connected to, who'd heard me being interviewed on a podcast, who was an ADHD specialist. I got in touch and said, hope you don't mind me messaging, but have you considered whether you might be ADHD? Because so many of the traits you've talked about would fit. So other people were recognizing it before I had. And what makes us extra interesting is that we're pretty sure Asher is as well. But that's another story for another day. And that's a very interesting topic to delve into.
Tell me about menopause though, because you touched on it, and we've had some publicity about, because it hadn't struck me till I was working with you, what it would be like to be in a same-sex relationship and having menopause symptoms, different symptoms, all at the same time. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, that was fun. And again, a bit like ADHD and neurodiversity, there's a spectrum. So it doesn't show up in the same way for everyone. Asha has a couple of years on me. So her perimenopause and then menopause showed up a few years before mine did. And we did not understand what was going on because there hadn't been, the menopause education. We just kind of laugh it off, think we're going to have a few hot flushes and get a bit scatty, maybe, find the TV remote in the fridge. We did find some protein powder Asha had put in the fridge a few days back, interestingly, still in the bag. But Asha's displayed so differently to mine. Asha got fraught, she got angry, she got frustrated. And mine wasn't like that at all. When mine hit, I genuinely thought I was losing my mind. I was forgetting things. I was missing appointments. I was crying all the time. And I really did think, my goodness, what is going on? I'm going to lose everything. How can I sustain my business in this way? And it's lucky that I had people like Kate Usher, who was able to talk to me, that I had just happened to have had a new doctor at my local practice who specialised in menopause, who was able to listen. And, we tried various things. I ended up, as it happens, on HRT and some antidepressants, which I know isn't right for everyone. But my goodness, it was such a roller coaster. And for someone like me, when so much of my work is to do with personal development, helping other people with their mindset, with growing their business, with staying positive, coming out of depression and breakdown, all of these things, I started to feel like a fraud as well. Because before I was getting help with it, I thought, well, how can I be teaching people these amazing techniques when they're not working for me? Or more to the point, they were working, but they weren't lasting. Because as quickly as I was doing something with my mindset or with my spirit and energy, my body was undoing it. So it led me to question everything. And I genuinely ended up in a really dark place for a while. And now it's just about on getting balanced out. And it will be interesting to see how things settle more so once I've had the chat with the specialist next week, whether I am, whether I'm not, we'll be able to forge a way forward. But yeah, it's interesting. It's hard enough for heterosexual couples. With two women living together, at least we were able to understand and support one another once we'd worked out what was going on. But it can be quite a juggle when you've got two people with very, very different symptoms, both falling into dark abysses at the same time.
And of course, because I'm sort of coming out the other end, there's also what people don't realise, there's postmenopause. So some things stay with you. So you don't know this because this is quite new, but I'm in the position now where I didn't have any HRT at all for perimenopause and menopause. And now post-menopause, they want to put me on HRT.
Yeah, I've got another client in the same position who went on to HRT at post 60 and they hadn't. And that's another thing, isn't it? People don't tell us about the spectrum there. There are so many people who have such a breeze with menopause and then think, what are you making such a fuss about? Because there's 25% who have it really, really easy. And then the rest of us divided between those who get a few symptoms and those who really plummet. And it's the same with postmenopause. I'm finding with some of my clients. So again, another of my clients has just gone on to HRT post 60, thought they were through the worst of it. And then all of a sudden, what the WTF? It's bonkers.
I know.
Well, I hope it sorts you out, Fee.
Well, I'm willing to give it a try. I take a lot of vitamins, nutrients. I do sort of anything I can to avoid taking more medication. But there's a point where you've got to think, right, this is the next thing I've got to try, the next thing. So I'm in that position. But Taz, I want to touch you a little bit about public speaking because you're on my speaker platform and you do a lot of speaking. Why? Why do you bother to do public speaking? What does it bring to you and your brand?
This might sound a bit counterproductive, but for me, it's not so much what it brings to me and my brand as what it can bring to other people. So you will know, some of the people watching might know as well, that so much of the work I do today comes from my own background, where I went through an abusive relationship. I went through suicidal ideation. I tried to check out and ended up breaking my back in 3 places. I had all kinds of health complaints as well. I ended up going through burnout and breakdown, and feeling that I had to step away from my career right at the very top level of international business-to-business publishing. And a big driver for me when it comes to my coaching and personal development with people, and this applies to business as well, is why I'm so keen with business owners to make sure they're doing the right thing, they're fulfilling their soul mission, something that fills them up. That makes the hard times so much easier when you're not doing it just for the money. And I figured that I must have been, or I chose to believe I must have been through everything I'd been through for a reason. And that perhaps me metaphorically hitting that brick wall meant that I could use my story, my experiences, to help other people avoid them, and to help other people recognize that actually there is a way out that is not permanent. When you're in that space, our brains take us to kind of a permanent vacation solution, because it's just our brains trying to work it out, and we haven't been taught what to do if things feel so bad. We don't know any alternative other than out of life. So that drives me an awful lot. It did then and it did now. And when I'm doing my speaking, I have a very strong drive to be able to serve, inspire, support, motivate as many people as I can in my tiny, tiny nutshell time here on this planet this time around. And so one-to-many, whether that's group coaching or whether it's public speaking, enables me to potentially positively impact lots of people at once. That's genuinely what drives me to do it. I love doing it because I'm naturally an introvert and have trained myself to appear to be extroverted in order to fulfill my role. And that overcoming my own fears and pushing my boundaries. Every time I speak, I get nervous. Every time. And I've always said that the second I stop getting nervous will be the time that I stop doing it, because those nerves come from a place of wanting to make sure that I can serve powerfully, I can do my best for people. And if that ever stops worrying me, then I've gone into ego and I should just step away. So that's what still drives me now. How does it benefit my brand? Well, massively, because, it's the same in reverse, isn't it? As much as I'm serving one-to-many, there are many people looking and recognizing how I might be able to help them on an individual basis, and then telling somebody else about it and telling somebody else about that. That applies whether it's one-to-many on a stage, or whether it's doing radio or TV, and even some of the live streams and the social media we work that we do as well. But for me, aside from wanting to serve as many people as I can, if something scares me, I'm going to push myself to do it. I always say I love roller coasters, but no word of a lie, every time, the second that bar clicks down, I start to panic and think, oh my God, I haven't got a will sorted out. What happens if I die? If I'm in another country, how's Ashley going to get my body back? Oh, you stupid idiot, why are you doing that? And then I just let go, and there's this exhilaration. If something scares you and it's not going to kill you, then you should do it. And when I'm teaching other people to speak on stages, it's the same thing. Everybody has a powerful story to tell. But where a lot of people get it wrong is they think they're just getting up there to share a big cathartic woe is me story. You have to look at what those situations we're speaking about did for us. How did we grow from it? How did we learn from it? How can we use the experiences that we had in our past to build on our future and to help us become a better version of ourselves, and potentially to leave a better mark on the world? And every human being has that story within them. They just need to learn to tell it. They need to make sure that they are speaking, that old phrase about speaking from the scar and not from the wound. They need to make sure they've worked through their stuff enough to get to the point to be able to safely share, and then they can make a positive impact. And then whatever it is we've been through, well, then it feels worth something, doesn't it? Because we can use it for the greater good. rather than just sitting on a woe is me story, and they're not very comfortable to sit on.
I've heard you speak several times, Taz, and there are two things that really impress me. One is you adapt it for the audience.
Mm-hmm.
So, you adapt it and you inspire people for the purpose that they are in the room, whether it's,
Mm-hmm.
a conference or a day-long event, whatever. So you adapt it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is you don't use PowerPoints or any type of script. Talk to me about that, because I've seen loads of speakers who just do a PowerPoint and then read what is on the screen. And for someone who's been in TV, that is just anathema to me. It's just like, why bother? You might as well just sit at the side and flick through your PowerPoint.
There's a double-sided coin to that. The one I always teach is that I've never seen a speech thus far that has needed to have a slide. I tend to have my logo up on the background because, from a very practical point of view, when people take pictures, my contact details are in the background.
Cool.
You have to be a very skilled speaker to be able to use images and a PowerPoint effectively. When I've done TED Talks, 2 of those required slides because it's the way TED works. Luckily, when I did the Dangerous Rainbow one I referenced earlier, they didn't even have a slide projector set up, so I could just speak from the heart and reel off some stats that I'd managed to memorize. So number one, if our stagecraft and our stage presence is good enough and we understand things like anchor points and we're willing to just engage with the audience, I don't believe we need them. They can benefit, but it's very, very rare that I've seen people use them well. The other point is that because of the way I hold information and because of the flow I get into, I have a real fear of having to rely on clicking that thing at the right time. I'm too in my head, which can take me off track, which is one of the reasons that I teach people not to script. It's different if you are creating something like a presentation on your company's new technology. But if you are telling your story, which is what I teach in the Heart of Speaking retreats, it is your story. You have lived it. You know that story inside and out, and you don't need to script it. It's engraved right in your DNA. So you need to recognize what is the impact you want for that audience or whoever has hired you. What's the impact they want for their audience or for their team? What are the parts of your story you can bring through to create that impact? How are you going to touch everybody in that room? And how are you going to uplift them at the end? How do you want them to be feeling when they leave that room? So that's why I never script it. The big thing with that is, as you pointed out earlier, I don't want to just go in there and just, repeat it rote as if I was reciting the times table, which I never learned. So that's a strange one for me to say. I want to be able to connect to the audience. And I like to see it as not me talking at people, but talking with people, which is why I engage so much, which is why I throw questions out into the room, which is why I have a little bit of fun at the beginning, because that allows me to be able to tune into the people in that room and go, right, that person over there needs help with that. They need help with that. As a collective, today they need to work on that. So I just mold according to who's in the room and intuitively what I believe they need and what they've unwittingly told me they need from the initial interaction. Does that answer your question?
So, yeah, it does. But I think actually you've gone a bit further than that. Are you meaning to tell me, because this I cannot do and might need to work on, do you mean to tell me that you adapt it as you go, depending how the room is responding to you? That is, whoa, that's mind-blowing.
Yeah, absolutely. I never know what I'm going to talk about. I'll have an outline. Somebody might say, I want you to come and work with our sales team and we want them to get their confidence up and smash through their targets. At which point I can say, right, so we need a bit of overcoming adversity. We need a bit of challenge with how to overcome challenges. If there's time, we might need to bring in a bit of practical empowerment stuff, get them to do some plethora arrow breaks or something. And we need to show them that they can achieve more. And I can use a lot of my story for that. I can also use a lot of my coaching skills for that, some NLP for that. Used ethically. There's a lot of people using NLP in a really bad way, which makes me feel a little bit sick. But yeah, I will adapt as I go. And this is why when people are booking me for a gig, I won't provide them with a script up front. I'll get the agreement from them that will cover this, this, and this. And are you happy for me to then adapt according to the vibe in the room? I've never had anyone say no. If they did, I'd walk away. It's not my gig.
Great. And that quickly, I'm going to end on this then. Is it all right to say no in business, Taz?
Yes, it's also okay to fire clients. It's always okay to say no. Every time you say yes to somebody else, you're saying no to yourself. And the more you say yes to stuff you don't want to do, the more you're going to struggle to get out of bed in the mornings. And for those of you running your own business, you do not start to run your own business to not enjoy your life. So in the early days, when frankly we just need to be covering the bills, of course, you need to say yes to a lot more, and you need to do a lot more as well. But as your business grows, you can start to become a little bit more selective with the people you choose to work with and start to outsource more. On one thing, just on that point, there are so many gurus out there telling people that what you need to do is look at your weak spots and then build on those so that you've got a full ship of everything really firing on all cylinders. I absolutely fundamentally disagree with that. There are parts of my business that in the early days I had to do, but that I'm not skilled at and I always hated. And rather than trying to upskill in the areas that don't suit me, I would now much rather outsource those to someone who loves them, to someone who can do it standing on their head, and then I can capitalize on my skills. If you capitalize on your weaknesses, you're never going to be any better than mediocre. If you outsource your weaknesses and capitalize on your natural born skills, that's when you really get to unleash your awesome for you and for others.
Oh, that seems a magical way to finish. Taz, just run through where people can find you, find out more about you.
Oh, you can find me everywhere. I'm on most of the social media channels. Just search for Taz Thornton. You'll find me, tazthornton.com, or you can always email me. I'm speaking, taz@tazthornton.com.
Brilliant. Taz, thank you. Will you come back next year and we'll do a sort of catch-up sesh?
I would love to. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you very much. Well,
Thank
everyone,
you.
thanks, Taz. I really hope you enjoyed that chat. We kind of went off in lots of different directions, but I think you've got lots of like PR tips, business tips. And if you're watching this on catch up and you want to ask questions, I'll keep an eye out and I will endeavour to answer them. Hope you join me again next month. Can't remember who my guest will be, but I will let you know in due course. Lots of love and have a brilliant weekend. Thanks, Taz. Cheers.
Take care.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye. Bye.